Ladies and gentlemen, the captain has turned on the fasten seatbelt sign. If you haven't already done so, please make sure the volume of this podcast is set perfectly to your listening enjoyment. Please take your seat, whether that's on the treadmill, car, sofa, or bed, and buckle in for the last trip. My name is Jamie Beebe, and I'll be your tour guide, recreating someone's last days in paradise. On behalf of myself and everyone behind the scenes, please enjoy the Last Trip podcast. And because nobody likes a long flight to get to where they want to be, let's prepare for takeoff. This week's episode takes a wild turn into the unbelievable. Our missing person didn't just vanish. He faked his own death, traveled halfway across the globe, and ultimately got caught. It all started when Ryan Borgwardt told his family he was going kayaking. When he didn't return, his wife reported him missing. Authorities found his overturned kayak and life preserver, shifting the mission from a rescue to a recovery. But after an exhaustive search, no trace of Ryan's body turned up in the lake. If he wasn't in the water, where was Ryan Borgwardt? Get ready, because today's episode feels like it's ripped straight from the script of a Hollywood movie. Ryan Borgwardt was living in Watertown, Wisconsin when he went missing. This caught my eye because I'm originally from Wisconsin, and a story like this is just not what you think would come out of a small town in the Midwest. Watertown is a quiet town with a population of about 22,000 people, located in the southeastern part of the state between Madison and Milwaukee. Its claim to fame is that it's the home to the first kindergarten in America, established in 1856. There's nothing about this town that would make me think it would be the headquarters of these kinds of scandalous international headlines. But the state of Wisconsin has had its share of true crime headlines through the years. The Slender Man stabbing in 2014, where two 12-year-old girls in Waukesha attempted to murder their classmate by stabbing her 19 times, saying they did it to appease the fictional character Slender Man. Stephen Avery from the Netflix documentary Making a Murderer also came out of Wisconsin. He was exonerated for a wrongful conviction, but then convicted for the murder of Teresa Halbach once he was released. And last but not least, Wisconsin is the birthplace of several notorious serial killers. Jeffrey Dahmer, the Milwaukee cannibal who murdered 17 men and boys, involving acts of necrophilia and cannibalism. And Ed Gein, known as the Butcher of Plainfield, who was a murderer and grave robber whose crimes inspired horror icons like Norman Bates and Leatherface. He actually crafted furniture and clothing out of human remains. So it's safe to say there are some crazy things going on in those sleepy Midwest towns. Getting back to Ryan Borgwardt, his plan was to disappear from Green Lake, which is about an hour from Watertown. The lake is the deepest natural inland lake in Wisconsin, reaching depths of over 237 feet, and it spans over 7,000 acres, so there's ample space for boating, fishing, and water sports. Ryan figured his body, never being found, wouldn't be that unusual because it was such a big lake. Ryan loved kayaking and fishing, so he knew no one would think twice about him being on the lake that day. It's a gorgeous part of Wisconsin, surrounded by rolling hills, wooded areas, and charming small towns. The perfect peaceful getaway spot. But it wasn't far enough of a getaway for Ryan Borgwardt, because rather than a day trip to the lake, he had plans for a permanent vacation. I'm sure most of us have thought about just leaving it all behind and hopping the next flight to an island in the middle of nowhere. At least, I think about it all the time. But what type of person actually takes the time to set up an elaborate scheme to run away to another country? Well, let's get to know Ryan Borgwardt.
Hey there, true crime aficionados. Looking for a podcast that's as twisted as it is hilarious?
Well, you've stumbled upon the perfect place. Welcome to Luminol On The Wall, or as we like to call it, Lotwa. I'm Becky, the sunshine to your day.
And I'm Bevy, the moonlight to your darkness. Together, we're the sisters you never knew you needed, bringing you true crime like you've never heard before.
Picture this. Two sisters, complete opposites.
Yeah, she's all sunshine and kindness, while I'm the queen of sarcasm and sass.
But that's what makes our sister chat so relatable. We're like the sun and the moon, lighting up your true crime journey with laughter and irreverence.
That's right. We dive into the darkest corners of humanity, but we don't just stop at the gore and the controversies. Oh no. We're here to roast the characters, each other, and sometimes even ourselves.
We laugh hysterically at our own jokes.
And we swear like sailors while we're at it, so if you're easily offended, consider this your warning.
But if you're ready for a wild ride through the twisted minds of murderers, join us on Lotwa. We'll cope with the horrific nature of our content the only way that we know how. That is with a healthy, or maybe excessive dose of sarcasm, wit, and a touch of crass humor.
So what are you waiting for? Hit that follow button and join our sisterhood as we navigate the murky waters of true crime together. We promise you won't regret it.
Just who is Ryan Borgwardt? There's not a lot of information about him online. It's said that people have a public life, a private life, and a secret life. Ryan's public life was just living the small town, day-to-day lifestyle. Getting married young, starting a family, and going to work every day. He married Emily Borgwardt 22 years ago, and they have 2 sons in high school and a daughter in elementary school. Emily is a first-grade teacher, and Ryan owns a woodworking company. And his company seemed to be doing okay. Beginning as a 1-year cabinetry program back in 1999, and over the years focusing on many different aspects of woodworking, acrylic fabrication, and general cabinetry production. Ryan owned Crimson Branches Woodworking. He worked on high-end residential cabinetry and furniture, as well as streamlined production of store fixtures and solid acrylic surfaces. His company was able to serve residential and commercial customers with new construction or remodels and updates. And with reviews like this one, we highly recommend Ryan. He's honest, hardworking, and does a great job. You won't be disappointed. It sounds like people in the community trusted him and his work. From the outside, his family life looked like the American dream. They hung out at neighborhood barbecues, kayaked the state's many lakes, and swam in their backyard pool. They had a lot of friends in the community and were fairly well known. Ryan's private life and work life seemed to be drama-free. He was getting up every day, working, and enjoying life. But his secret life was a completely different animal. The skeleton in the closet was that he was chatting online with a woman in Uzbekistan and plotting his escape for almost a whole year before finally pulling the trigger. Even the people closest to him had no idea. So, how did he pull it off? August 11th, 2024 was just like any other summer day in Wisconsin. It was beautiful, sunny, and warm. The perfect day to spend kayaking and fishing on the lake. Ryan left Watertown and drove an hour north to Green Lake and presumably spent the day fishing. That night, at about 10:45, Ryan texted his wife and told her he was turning his kayak around and heading to the shore soon. But he never returned home, and that was the last time she ever heard from him. The next morning, when Ryan still hadn't come home, Emily called 911 and reported her husband missing. The sheriff's deputies started their search. They got a bunch of boats from the Department of Natural Resources and were out on the lake by 8:30 a.m. They also called Bruce's Legacy because they knew they would need extra help. Bruce's Legacy is a nonprofit organization dedicated to water rescue and recovery, particularly focusing on underwater search and recovery operations. It was founded by Keith Cormican in memory of his brother Bruce, who was a firefighter who drowned in the line of duty. After his death, Keith went on to build this organization to help other families of drowning accidents. The organization exists to provide resolution to families who have lost a loved one due to drowning or water-related accidents. If a victim drowns but is never located, it's much more difficult and painful for that family to say goodbye and move forward in the healing process. So, Bruce's legacy comes in to help. And Keith is really, really good at his job. If there's a body, he's going to find it. Searchers and authorities had already pinged Ryan's phone and were on the lake at the spot they thought he was when he sent Emily a text letting her know he was turning that boat around to go home. They knew he was in the water because they found his vehicle and trailer for the kayak parked in the southwest side of the lake. They also found his overturned kayak and life jacket in the lake, further prompting them to believe Ryan drowned that night, especially because the kayak was found in the deepest part of the lake. Another visitor on the lake soon found his fishing rod and his tackle box, with his keys and wallet still inside. Everything pointed to an accident. Authorities and crews from Bruce's legacy got to work on a recovery effort. They scoured the lake for weeks using divers, underwater drones, and towable submersible sonar. They were doing everything they could think of to find Ryan's body, but there was no sign of him. On August 15th, Emily shared a heartfelt post on Facebook. It was a photo of Jesus in the water with the caption, "I've always loved this picture, but it really has new meaning these last few days. Can you just imagine Jesus reaching out his hand to Ryan and saying, 'Let's go, my child'? How amazing." On August 24th, they brought in 3 cadaver dogs to try and help. And while they did get several hits when the divers went in, they still came back empty-handed. But no one wanted to give up, and Emily was instrumental in keeping the search going for Ryan. She did everything she could to raise funds to find Ryan's body. She sold t-shirts with messages like "Faith over fear" and held fundraisers to gather funds for more equipment and searches. On September 19th, she thanked officials for their continued efforts and let people know that she would have to return to work as a teacher to take care of their 3 kids. The search had gone on and still failed to locate Ryan's body in the water. But his family knew he drowned, so they had already been grieving for several months. Emily lost her husband of 22 years, and 3 children would grow up without their father. Emily wrote on social media, "While I will never understand why God had to take Ryan home way sooner than I would have liked, I will forever be at peace knowing that he's enjoying heaven with his Savior." The search for Ryan's body continued for more than 50 days. But in early October, authorities ended the search. They hadn't found anything at all, and they'd searched the entire lake. They felt they had to turn the search somewhere else because while they didn't know where he might be, they were sure he wasn't in that lake. How did authorities piece together that not only was Ryan not in that lake, but he wasn't even dead? Mostly a hunch and a little out-of-the-box thinking, although they had no idea what they would actually find in the end. They did a quick search and found out that Ryan's name had actually been checked at the Canadian border on August 13th, 2 days after he had supposedly drowned in the lake. And it was a shock. Finding Ryan alive was not expected in their wildest imaginations. From there, things started to unravel. They discovered that Ryan had crossed the border into Canada and then taken a flight to Uzbekistan. The case broke loose when they searched his computer. Through digital forensic analysis, investigators found that Ryan replaced the drive on his laptop and cleared his browser history on the day of his disappearance. And this was all because he had been communicating with a woman he met on the internet from Uzbekistan. They also learned that Ryan had been conspiring his disappearance as far back as January of that year, when he took out a $375,000 insurance policy, possibly to take care of his family in his absence. He also bought a bunch of airline gift cards. In May, 3 months before his disappearance, he reported his passport was lost or stolen and ordered a new one. It was later determined his passport was never lost or stolen and was right at home where it always was. and he used the new one to travel to Uzbekistan. He also took photos of his passport, changed his emails, and moved his money to a foreign bank, all without anyone becoming suspicious. Authorities told Emily everything they were finding out, but she was sworn to secrecy, so everyone else still thought Ryan had died on the lake. That must have been an absolutely horrendous secret to keep from the people that had joined in the search, from her community, and most of all, from her own kids who were grieving their father. Once they got into Ryan's computer, they called every phone number and went through every email address until they eventually reached a Russian-speaking woman who connected them with Ryan. Ryan was alive. It's unclear whether she was the woman he went to Uzbekistan to meet, but that's when they knew they had him. They spoke to him at great lengths about how he got out of the country and whether he was safe, finally asking him for a proof of life video, which he willingly provided on November 11th. But what he wasn't willing to do was come home or speak to anyone in his family. Authorities scheduled a press conference, only telling his children he was alive a day before telling the rest of the world. At the press conference, they told the whole story and spoke directly to Ryan, urging him to come home. They told him they could all talk through everything and work things out because his family needed him. And it would be a great Christmas present for his kids to see the dad they thought was dead. They showed his proof of life video during the press conference. It's a 24-second video that Ryan appears to have filmed on his phone. He's standing in front of a gray front door with a peephole and a deadbolt, saying in hushed tones, "Good evening, it's Ryan Borgwardt. Today is November 11th. It's approximately 10 a.m. by you guys. I'm in my apartment. I am safe, secure, no problem." And they also told the world the whole elaborate plan that Ryan had cooked up. He paddled his kayak and a child-sized floating boat out into the lake. Then he got in the floaty and overturned the kayak along with his fishing rod and tackle box. He also dumped his phone. Then he paddled the inflatable boat to shore and grabbed the e-bike he stashed near the boat launch earlier. He got on the e-bike and rode all through the night about 70 miles to Madison, Wisconsin. Now, I'm shocked that no one saw him riding this bike along the Wisconsin highway. But also, no one was looking for him on the highway because they all thought he drowned in the lake. Once he got to Madison, he ditched the e-bike and boarded a bus to Detroit, and then right up to and across the Canadian border. He got on another bus that took him to the airport and hopped his flight to Uzbekistan. He told authorities that during his planning, he chose Green Lake because it's one of the deepest lakes in the state, so he didn't think searchers would have spent more than 2 weeks looking for him. He even said he felt bad about the amount of hours they'd put into his search. And he should feel bad. Those resources could have gone to someone who actually needed it. Keith Cormacan from Bruce's Legacy put in many, many hours and later said, "He wasted a lot of my time and it cost me a lot of money." But Keith was instrumental in figuring out that Ryan wasn't in that lake. That's just how good his track record is. Because he couldn't find the body, it really meant he wasn't there. When they asked Ryan why he chose to disappear so mysteriously, he told them that he had personal matters going on, and he felt like faking his death and leaving the country was the best thing for him to do. Of course, he conveniently left out what those personal matters are. But I'm sure they have a lot to do with meeting a woman from Uzbekistan on the internet. During all of this, his wife has remained so strong. She searched relentlessly for the husband she loved, and then had to hold the secret from her own children that their dad was actually alive and continued to grieve with them. And never once has she come forward as any type of a scorned woman or bashed him or really said anything at all. All she did was change her Facebook profile photo from one of the two of them to one that simply says, "Be still," and later told the media, "I cannot make any comments at this time since it is still an active investigation." Other than that, she's been strong and silent. As the case stands now, all we truly know is that Ryan is alive and well, likely living somewhere in Eastern Europe, with no plans to return home. One thing we know for sure is that Ryan's family was not involved in any way, and they're just as shocked, probably more shocked, than the rest of the world. Let's remember that they are the real victims in this case. They're the ones left to pick up the pieces and struggle to move on from the damage and trauma that Ryan caused them. According to the Wisconsin sheriff, his family would still like him to come home and he should try to make it in time for Christmas with the kids. But I wonder if the family actually wants him to come home or if it's the sheriffs that want him to come home and face the music. Ryan has expressed concerns that if he does come back, it's going to be hard to live and that no one will accept him. But the sheriff said the community has stated they're willing to forgive. Now, I thought Ryan would have serious legal consequences for what he did. But after doing a little research, it doesn't seem like he's going to get in that much trouble if he does come back. Because there's actually no specific federal offense for someone faking their own death and fleeing the country. He could potentially face a Class A misdemeanor for obstruction and possibly a Class I felony for insurance fraud. The definition of obstruction in this case is when you give false information to an officer or you knowingly place physical evidence with the intent to mislead an officer. So when he dumped his kayak and left his wallet, that's knowingly planting evidence. Class A misdemeanors in Wisconsin can result in a fine of up to $10,000 or maximum of 9 months in prison, or possibly both. Insurance fraud is determined to be a Class I felony if the claim is more than $2,500, and this was for $375,000. This is the lowest level felony in Wisconsin, and it can carry a prison sentence of up to 3.5 years. But the family never tried to claim the policy, so at the least, that would be cut in half. What could make this felony applicable to him is because the insurance fraud statutes speak about presenting fraudulent claims or causing a fraudulent claim to be presented. And if you fake your own death, then you are causing a fraudulent claim to be presented. The county where he went missing spent a lot of money on search efforts, so they can try to get the money back, and he'd likely have to pay around $35,000 to $40,000 in restitution. But a lot of people owe more than that on their credit cards, so it doesn't seem like that big of a deal to owe a little money. Most people see what Ryan did as a huge crime, but legally, you can walk off grid, go live in a cabin, or join a monastery without telling anyone. And technically, it's not a crime at all. But it's obviously morally wrong and hurts a lot of people, so don't do it. While the long arm of the law can't do much to Ryan, the IRS has something up their sleeve. Because if Ryan doesn't come back and pay his taxes, that could be a case of tax evasion. The IRS says any person who willfully attempts in any manner to evade or defeat any tax imposed or the payment thereof shall, in addition to other penalties provided by law, be guilty of a felony, and, upon conviction thereof, shall not be fined more than $100,000 or imprisoned not more than 5 years or both, together with the costs of prosecution. I personally feel that's not enough time for all the problems and trauma Ryan caused, but I suppose it's better than nothing. Of course, Ryan has not yet decided to return home, and if he does, it will be of his own free will. He's believed to be somewhere in Eastern Europe, but no one knows his exact whereabouts. One thing I bet he did research and knows is that the U.S. does not have an extradition treaty with Uzbekistan or Russia. The bottom line is that Ryan Borgwardt is just kind of a dumpster fire of a human being. He's caused a huge mess and doesn't want to take responsibility. Although, interestingly enough, he may have caused another man to face the music. There was a viral TikTok video that was originally thought to be Ryan, posted from the account of Authentic Alpha. In the video, there's a woman holding a sign that says, "Ask me for free advice." A man on an e-bike, bearing an uncanny resemblance to Ryan, pulls up and tells the woman that he's torn between staying in the U.S. or moving to Uzbekistan to meet a woman. The advice giver asks him more about his predicament. He says he's married with grown children, and his wife doesn't know about his plans. The advice was to deal with his wife and marriage before running off to Uzbekistan with a woman he met on the internet. But he doesn't seem convinced that's the right advice. Now, most people thought the man in the video was Ryan, and although he's a great lookalike, it was proven not to be him. The funny part is that it was viewed so many millions of times because it looked so much like Ryan that I'm sure this guy's wife found out about his idea to move to Uzbekistan, and hopefully she divorced him. Now, if Ryan is in Uzbekistan, what could he be doing there? And why could it be a good place to hide after faking your own death? More after a word from our sponsors. Uzbekistan is an interesting country in Central Asia that's landlocked between Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Afghanistan, and Turkmenistan. It's home to around 36 million people, which makes it the most populous country in Central Asia. The official language is Uzbek, but Russian is widely spoken as a second language there. And that's because it became part of the Soviet Union in 1924, but gained independence in 1991 after the USSR dissolved. It's one of the world's largest cotton producers. It's rich in natural gas, gold, and uranium. Wealth in Uzbekistan is not evenly distributed, with rural areas being much poorer than the cities, and a large portion of the population works abroad, mainly in Russia. But why would Ryan choose Uzbekistan? Beyond being a country that won't extradite people back to the US, becoming a citizen of Uzbekistan as an American is possible, but they don't allow dual citizenship. An applicant would need to renounce their US citizenship. There are a few ways to become a citizen there. One being if you reside in Uzbekistan for 5 consecutive years under a permanent residence permit, you can apply for citizenship. If you marry an Uzbek citizen, it may accelerate the residency requirements, but does not automatically grant citizenship. Citizenship may be granted to individuals who make significant contributions to Uzbekistan in areas like science, culture, or investment, at the discretion of the government. If you have Uzbek ancestry or were born in Uzbekistan, you may be eligible for simplified procedures. The general requirements include a valid permit, proficiency in the Uzbek language, a clean criminal record, adherence to Uzbek laws, proof of stable income or financial self-sufficiency, and renouncing U.S. citizenship. The cost of living is significantly lower than in the U.S., including housing, food, and transportation. For example, you can rent a comfortable apartment in the capital city for $300 to $600 a month, and even lower rates in smaller cities. Most expats work in education teaching English, international organizations, or entrepreneurial business ventures. Remote work is always a possibility, but reliable internet isn't always available. Uzbekistan has a fairly low violent crime rate, and petty crimes like pickpocketing and theft are uncommon. The U.S. Travel Advisory has Uzbekistan at a level 1, exercise normal precautions. Terrorist attacks have happened in Uzbekistan and could happen again. But despite sharing a border with Afghanistan, there is little religious extremism and crime against foreigners are rare. But the real reason Ryan wanted to go to Uzbekistan was probably because he was chatting with a woman he met online that lives there, and he abandoned his family to be with her. Now my question is, was it the real deal, or was it some kind of romance scam gone wrong? In a romance scam, they may contact someone through dating apps, social media, or email and portray themselves as attractive and interested in a relationship. Over time, they gain the victim's trust by sharing personal stories, photos, or declaring their love. Once that trust is established, they start asking for money. Maybe they claim they need money to visit the victim, have medical issues or financial crisis, or need extra gifts or money for the victim to prove their love. And then once they get the money, they usually vanish. But in this case, Ryan actually went to Uzbekistan, and that's not how a romance scam works. They only want the money, not the person. Sadly, we may never know the real reason Ryan chose Uzbekistan, but at least his family knows he's alive. And guys, if you're thinking you'd be able to fake your own death and get away with it, think again. because it's a lot harder than it looks. While it has been attempted throughout history, most cases result in exposure, either because of legal investigations, careless mistakes, or the challenges of maintaining a false identity. However, some people have temporarily or even permanently evaded detection. Some famous cases include John Darwin from the UK. In 2002, he disappeared while canoeing, leading everyone to believe he had drowned. He lived secretly in a house near his family and later moved to Panama with his wife. He was discovered after he reappeared in the UK in 2007, claiming to have amnesia. Him and his wife were then convicted of fraud. Ken Kesey, author of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, was able to stage his suicide in the 1960s by leaving his car on a cliff and fleeing to Mexico to avoid drug charges. He eventually returned to the US and faced the consequences. Lord Lucan was accused of murdering his nanny in 1974 in the UK, so he disappeared, leading to speculation he faked his own death. His fate remains a mystery, but a lot of people believe he lived under an alias abroad. Jeremiah Heaton staged his own death in the US in the 1990s to avoid legal issues, and he lived undetected for years. But eventually he was found and prosecuted for his crimes. Just like Ryan Borgwardt, most people get caught. So unless you're faking your own death and running away from your problems, make sure that no matter where you're traveling, you inform someone about your plans before going anywhere. Tell someone reliable where you're going and what you'll be doing and when to expect you back. And my number one tip to staying alive on vacation is to pay attention to your gut. If something doesn't feel right, it isn't. Authorities are continuing to investigate Ryan, who they believe is alive and living in Eastern Europe or Central Asia. They are also looking for anyone who may have assisted him in faking his death and fleeing. Ryan Borgwardt is 45 years old, about 5 feet 11 inches, with an average build. He has shaved, balding brown hair and blue eyes. He staged his death on the night of August 11, 2024, and fled to Uzbekistan, where he was found and subsequently sent a proof of life video, but refuses to come back to the United States. If you have any information or know anyone that helped Ryan disappear, please call 1-800-GET-THEM. That's 1-800-GET-THEM. And Ryan, if you're listening, it's time to come home. You need to face your responsibilities like a grown man. You've put your family and your community through enough trauma. And finally, remember to leave a review and rate this podcast 5 stars if you like the show, or hell, even if you don't. But either way, feel free to let me know what you think. Please follow The Last Trip on Instagram at The Last Trip Crime Pod, and subscribe on Patreon to support the show. You'll get extra research, videos, photos, and updates, and even learn more about my personal travels. That's patreon.com/thelasttrippodcast. I'm Jamie Beebe, bringing you your last trip and signing off until the next one. Thanks for listening.